We're going to go back to take it forward and bring it up to date, because Jonas Gutierrez on the 14th of October 2015 accused Newcastle United of discrimination. Former Newcastle United player Jonas Gutierrez is suing the club over the way he says they treated him after he was diagnosed with testicular cancer. The Argentina international, who's 32, was released by the Magpies last season after 7 years on Tyneside. He returned to action in March after 18 months of treatment and recovery. Gutierrez is alleging disability discrimination by the club, and an employment tribunal is due to hear the case next March. The player helped Newcastle to avoid relegation from the Premier League with a goal in a 2-0 win over West Ham on the final day of last season, one of only 10 appearances he made for the club following his initial diagnosis in 2013. However, he was released shortly afterwards and now plays for Deportivo La Coruña in Spain. In June of last year, he told BBC how the club made him feel like they don't care by telling him they were releasing him in a phone call. Sounds a lot like Sean Waltman, aka X-Pac. Broken neck, released by a fax. Same with Steve Austin, actually. Torn his tricep, released by FedEx. But yeah, he had surgery in October 2013 after being diagnosed with testicular cancer, then received chemotherapy when it returned. He was finally given the all clear to play again earlier in 2015, as mentioned. Now, fast forward to April 14th, 2016. Midfielder Jonas Gutierrez was dropped by Newcastle United because of his cancer diagnosis, an employment tribunal has found. Jonas Gutierrez was suing the Magpies Newcastle for about £2 million on the grounds of disability discrimination. The tribunal also ruled the club made it impossible for Gutierrez to trigger an appearance-based contract extension. Now, Newcastle say they are dismayed by the judgment and are considering further options with their legal team. Gutierrez barrister Martin Budworth said the tribunal has made it clear that a Premier League football club owes the same duties to a disabled person as any other employer. Claims of unfavourable treatment and another of harassment related to disability were dismissed. A further remedy hearing will be held in due course, in which compensation will be addressed. Although Gutierrez has not released a statement, he did post on social media saying, "Always in my heart, Geordie Nation, I love you." Now, Gutierrez's claims, as mentioned, is one of them was he'd been a regular at St James's Park before he was diagnosed with testicular cancer in October of 2013, scoring 10 goals in 177 appearances at the time, and the return of the illness and subsequent treatment. The Argentina international sued Newcastle over the way he was treated following his diagnosis and claimed the Premier League club saw him as a liability after he returned from treatment. He also alleged that he was not selected for some of the second half of the 2014-15 season when the Magpies avoided relegation on the final day, so the club would not trigger an automatic one-year contract extension. Now, the findings, the tribunal found that Guitierrez was discriminated against following his diagnosis and subsequent return to fitness, as it deemed he was considered part of the club's plans right up to the point of his absence. The ruling also stated that Guitierrez had maintained his place in the starting lineup without difficulty for 5 years. Just over 2 weeks after the claimant returned to the club in November 2013 following his diagnosis and treatment, and at a point when he was match fit and returned into action, he was told that he no longer featured in the club's future plans. We conclude that the decision to drop the claimant was because of the claimant's cancer. The tribunal also concluded that Gutierrez was not considered for selection following his return to fitness until he could not achieve the 80 Premier League starts required over the length of his 4-year contract to trigger the extension. As a result of his absence because of cancer, Gutierrez only had 121 games instead of 152 to earn his extended deal, and the club had discriminated against him by failing to make reasonable adjustments. The ruling stated it was in essence more difficult for the claimant to achieve the required number of games because in the periods of time that he was absent for treatment or rehabilitation, he had to be more frequently selected as a proportion of the total number of games available than his non-disabled counterparts. We conclude that this was substantial, more than minor or trivial disadvantage. A substantial disadvantage. Had the possibility of triggering the clause not been an issue, then Mr. Charnley, Newcastle Managing Director Lee Charnley, would not have needed to discuss it at all with Mr. Carver, John Carver, and would not have needed to double check how close the claimant was to triggering the cause. Now, claims of unfavourable treatment were rejected as his move to Norwich City on loan in January 2014 was consensual. A claim of harassment which related to Guitierrez training and playing with the under-21s was also dismissed as the tribunal ruled that many players such as David Santon, Sim de Jong and Gabriel Obertan were required to do so to gain match fitness after injury. Now, in terms of the witnesses, Guitierrez was found to be a credible and convincing witness. Former Newcastle boss Alan Pardew was able to deliver his evidence in a confident and convincing and articulate way. However, the detail of what was said was not necessarily as credible as the manner in which the evidence was delivered. Some of Pardew's evidence was deemed to be contradictory and inconsistent. Very important point to focus on there. Managing Director Charnley's evidence was described as evasive and lacking in credibility. And this is Newcastle United's Managing Director Lee Charnley. Come back to that in a minute. Parts of former Newcastle boss John Carver's evidence were vague and were rejected. Newcastle's unconvincing evidence. In August 2013, Newcastle's club doctor advised that Guitierrez, who was recovering from a hamstring injury, should be picked as a substitute at the very most. Pardew had picked Guitierrez to play and told the hearing that he did not understand the doctor's advice, a claim the tribunal considered improbable. Pardew was dismissive of some of the doctor's notes in Guitierrez's medical record, which read, somehow managed to start the game against Manchester City, manager's decision against medical advice. Charnley would not accept that Guitierrez was an established international player despite winning 22 caps and playing at the 2010 World Cup for Argentina. Charnley could not say how many international players Newcastle had in their squad in September of 2011. Charnley said that Guitierrez's 71 starts in 76 games in 2011-2012 and 2012-2013 only demonstrated someone who plays for the first team and not consistent performance. And I'm going to come back to that later because that's oxymoronic at best. Carver told the tribunal that Guitierrez had a certain clause in his contract that if he reached a certain criteria. He later said there was no discussion about the clause and denied knowing about what the certain criteria might be. So again, very contradictory there. But it's one of them. A couple of questions come out of this. Potentially sets a massive precedent that Jonas Gutierrez has won this case, and it's good that it was actually stated that Premier League clubs do have the same duty of care as other employers when it comes to disability, because that's the way it should be. If you are a legitimate employer, you do have a duty of care, in my opinion. But Gezzie Fizzle, what's your view on Jonas Gutierrez winning his case against Newcastle United?
Well, I have to say, I think in order for him to win it, there has to be sufficient grounds. And in my opinion, there was sufficient grounds. I was actually quite surprised, to think that a player that was so instrumental in them staying up was to kind of be pushed aside in the way that he was. So, for me, it's not surprising, and Newcastle have a lot to answer for as a football club and a sporting organisation, right? Because if we go back to that period of time with our Pitch Talk live shows, I actually said this is one of the stories of the season, right? With the fact that he was away from the first team with cancer, comes back, beats cancer, and then saves the club from relegation. I'm like, I actually said at the time, it's the ultimate feel-good story of the season.
Yeah, I remember it well.
So for him, who is essentially a club hero, cult hero among all the fans, just for that, never mind all the games before, just for that, he's a cult hero. And he's been discarded like this. Like, he could have, there's so many different ways that Newcastle could have handled this. right? In the sense of, if they didn't think that he was physically fit enough to play again, they could have had him come out, make a formal announcement. He could now be a club ambassador, right? While playing at a lower level, if he decided to do so, right? There's so many other ways for Newcastle to have taken this. It really is, in my opinion, absolutely ridiculous that it was allowed to get this far. Absolutely ridiculous, because one, he's played such a major part in the club history. Number two, he's still an employee, right? And number three, the discrimination or potential discrimination there is just sickening, to be frank with you. It's just sickening, especially when you consider all that he's given the club as well. So, you know, as you rightly pointed out, there is it's a very interesting precedent that's being set there. Very interesting precedent, because now a lot of other clubs are going to have to be a lot more careful with how they deal with players with other health concerns, because this isn't just about cancer. No, this is about all health concerns, full stop.
I couldn't agree more.
All right, so if a player has a persistent injury layoff because of a persistent knee injury or hamstring injury, or calf injury or ankle injury, all of those things are now in play because of this ruling. So, as I say, I think it has a much wider impact. And then, of course, you know, to broaden it even further, it has a very wide and overarching impact across all sport, especially in the UK. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens from this point going forward. But as I say, if there wasn't grounds for this, it wouldn't be awarded, in my humble opinion. So the mere fact that it was awarded, I says to you, one, he has grounds, and number two, they've done enough to have that all sorted out. So for me, I'm very happy that this is the case, because one, this was an issue that needed to be addressed anyway, in terms of sport and law, and the implications of how sports teams manage their players in terms of health, fitness and injury, and return from injury, as well as sickness as well. So it's huge in that regard. And of course, you know, in terms of personal victories, it's a huge personal victory for Jonas Gutierrez and his family. Absolutely huge. And, you know, I can only send out my thoughts to them to say, you know, it's only a small measure, and I don't want to say justice, it's really just compensation, right? Because if you were to ask Jonas Gutierrez, does he even now still want to play for Newcastle, the answer would be absolutely yes. The only reason why it doesn't is because of how the club treated him. So you also have to look at the hierarchy of the club and say, did no one have any kind of perception of, you know, just the personal implications for Jonas himself? For you to turn around to him and essentially say to him, look, we know this was your livelihood. We know you gave, you know, many years of your life to the game and to the club, but we don't want you anymore on account of what's happened to you. I mean, forget football, right? Let's just look at it from a wider life perspective. If anyone was to turn around and say that to you about anything to do with you, how would you feel? You'd feel awful. So, you know, his feelings of anger and everything else, totally justified in my opinion. Totally justified. And I think going forward, you know, it's a lesson for a lot of different clubs and for individuals as well. So I'd say if there are any other individuals that feel that they're being exiled or persecuted for health reasons, this is now the president to go and say, well, look, if this is how you feel and you have evidence to back it up, take them to court. And for the other clubs as well, it's a notice to say, look, it's not going to be tolerated from a legal perspective in terms of how you're going to deal with players in regards to sickness, injuries, health, and fitness. It's not going to be tolerated anymore. So clubs are going to have to be very careful. But I also think overall, it needs to be said that now, I think if there was a repeat of this incident, where there was a player that was diagnosed with cancer, comes back from cancer, and then is then exiled, or not even exiled, I think the way to deal with that player, honestly, if they physically cannot play anymore, right? If they physically cannot play anymore, they are a club spokesperson, an ambassador, right? And they're there for every home game and involved in community projects. That's it. Right? If you want to do community outreach work regarding cancer and everything else, you have someone to go and do all your public speaking that's affiliated with the club. If you want to set up a foundation, right, that goes and does outreach work for people that support the club but are also dealing with issues surrounding cancer or any other severe illness. I mean, I'm not suggesting all these ideas for Newcastle United, but I think, one, these are all things that they should have done. And number two, why are you not doing it? And number three, if you want any help with setting that up, you can call me. We'll get all of those things on board. Because at the end of the day, realistically speaking, for everything that is in that machine at Newcastle United, these things should have been thought of already. This should have never happened. It's entirely avoidable, and I'll be honest with you, it's a shame. It's an absolute shame. Because now I say to you, as an employer, this is purely from a business perspective, as an employer, who wants to go and work for Newcastle United knowing this is what they've done? I will tell you right now, even though I said they can call me, I wouldn't want to work with them. Not based on that. I mean, not based on that, because I say if that's how they can treat him, how are they treating everybody else? How are they going to treat me?
Well, the thing is with football, and I know I might be beating a bit of a dead horse here in terms of, because I've said it so much. Football, sadly, is such an unscrupulous sport. Embarrassingly unscrupulous. I mean, it's one of them ones where if a club can potentially treat someone, or actually be proven to have treated someone with testicular cancer, who was diagnosed with testicular cancer like that, then that's not only unscrupulous, that is an absolute effing disgrace. It really is. I'd love to play the Didier Drogba soundbite, but this isn't even a joke, and nor am I trying to make one. It's one of them ones where it's like Lee Charnley, Newcastle's chief executive coming out, like his evidence being ruled by the tribunal to be evasive. It's like, why are you being evasive for? If you ain't got nothing to hide, you don't need to be evasive. So it's one of them ones when I was reading through that and seeing how Newcastle had treated Jonas Gutierrez, it's one of them ones, like apparently John Carver being told by the powers that be at the club, right, don't play this person because we don't want to trigger his automatic release clause, his automatic contract extension clause, because we see him as a liability because he's been diagnosed with testicular cancer. All that when I read that, it was just like,
tell me I did not just see that.
It was literally that. Cause then I'm literally thinking to the powers that be at Newcastle, especially even with John Carver saying, oh yeah, he knew of a clause in the contract but didn't know what the clause was. John Carver, yo, bro.
If I want any crap out of you, I'll pick it out of your teeth.
Because there's no point you knowing that there's a clause in the contract if you're not going to know what it is. That's just stupid. That doesn't even make sense. Just like how Jonas Gutierrez was treated. That doesn't even make sense. Number one, that's a disgrace ethically. Number two, that's a disgrace professionally. And number three, from a PR standpoint, you're basically digging yourself a grave with a fork and spoon. It's really that stupid to do that kind of crap, and it's not on. It really isn't. It really is not on. So Jonas Gutierrez actually winning this tribunal case, this basic disability discrimination case. Fact of the matter is, it sets a very good precedent. It's that if a club discriminates against you and you can prove it, then hell, take them to court. Take them to court, because clubs cannot think that they are above the law. They cannot think that they are gods. And also, as much as people say players are supposed to be role models, clubs are supposed to be role models as well, because they essentially are professional entities. And a lot of clubs, for example, Millwall, for example, like I could name a bunch of other clubs, Brentford, who do stuff in the community. These clubs are community hubs and community entities, as well as being professional entities. So you should conduct yourself in a professional and community orientated manner. And you should not be doing this kind of thing to people, because then how does that look in the community? Like, imagine I had a disabled child and that child wanted to play football, and the only club near to me was Newcastle. I wouldn't trust them. If they're gonna treat someone who plays in their first team like that, I ain't trusting them with my child. Well, I'm going somewhere else where my child's gonna get treated fairly. Or even if it was me, it'd be one of them ones. I wouldn't want to get treated like that by a club. Bugger that. One of them ones. If they're gonna treat one of their first teamers like that, how do you think they're gonna treat someone who's a reserve? How do you think they're gonna treat a youth player with the same potential condition? It's one of them ones. It is just not on. It really is not on. As much as people chastise Aston Villa, look at how well they treated Stilian Petrov. There's somewhat of a comparison there. Whereas Aston Villa treated him very, very well, and then Newcastle were just like, don't worry about it. Just make sure he doesn't trigger his clause. We want to save the money, because again, this is kind of what it comes down to. Football being an unscrupulous sport because of money. Because automatically renewing someone's contract for another year costs money, and you don't want to do it. And it's one that it is just absolutely disgraceful that has happened. And I mean, the Newcastle's unconvincing evidence. Where is it? The doctor's notes in Guitierrez's medical record somehow managed to start the game against Man City. Manager's decision against medical advice. So that's essentially the club doctor trying to bury the manager. It's like, bro, if you're saying he's not fit to play, then say he's not fit to play. Don't try and throw someone else under the bus for what you're saying. Because hey, it's one of them. If I want to crap out of you, I'd pick it out of your teeth. I mean, there's one, even, Lee Charnley. It's one of them was coming out, would not accept Guitierrez was an established international player, even though he's won 22 caps and played at the 2010 World Cup for Argentina. That just sounds stupid. 71 starts in 76 games in 2011, 2012 and 2012, 2013 only demonstrated someone who plays for the first team and not consistent performance. That's just stupid. As a line, that is just stupid. That is one of the stupidest lines in this whole thing. How can you start 71 games out of 76 in two seasons or over 2 seasons, and that's not consistent, and that's not demonstrating consistent performance? That's just stupid. That doesn't even make sense. That makes as much sense as a chocolate teapot. That makes about as much sense as bloody Sepp Blatter saying, I want to restore the image of FIFA. It's one of them ones. It would make as much sense as that. Makes as much sense as some people, as Jake the Snake Roberts saying he wants to clean up wrestling in 1999. But it's one of them ones. I mean, John Carver had saying, Guitierrez had a certain clause in his contract that if he reached a certain criteria, but said there was no discussion about the clause and denied knowing what the certain criteria might be. I mean, you're clearly, it's one of them ones. If you had no discussion about the clause, then how do you know about it? You've been reading the papers? How do you know about it? Dude, I just think he's lying. He's lying through his teeth. You're not supposed to lie on oath, bro. You're not supposed to. But the fact is, it's an absolute disgrace the way Guitierrez was treated. And for him having to deal with testicular cancer, and then your own club are basically making it harder for you to do what you do as a profession. So you've already got the concern of, oh my God, what's going to happen with me and testicular cancer? What's going to happen? Am I going to have a testicle removed? Is the cancer going to spread? Obviously, you've got stuff like that flying around your head. You don't want your employer literally making everything harder for you. This is why this is an absolute disgrace, to be perfectly honest. I mean, it's one of them ones, man. It's embarrassing to football, to be perfectly frank. This is another instance of something that is just embarrassing to the game of football, and it just makes everyone look bad when you've got clubs doing this. It's bringing the game into disrepute and makes everybody look bad. It really does just make everybody look bad. And I'm glad Jonas Gutierrez won it. And I'm really glad. I'm actually really glad. But anyway, it's one of them ones, man. I mean, Ryan Sonley, you wanted to jump in on this point, didn't you?
Yeah, I thought this was actually a good, valid point. I mean, Jonas Gutierrez should never have been released by Newcastle. I mean, it was a big shock. Obviously, he wanted to stay at Newcastle, and he was unfairly treated by them. So, I mean, I'm gutted for him that he had to leave Newcastle at the end of the season. But, I mean, I feel that he was well and wherever he was a good player for them, and he did well for them. So, I mean, respect for him to being a bit better player and going to a team and proving that he is the better player. Because it reminds me of like the players like Elliot Richards, Roman Lario, who have all had cancer of some sort, and their teams are stuck by them. And Newcastle didn't even do that with Jonas. They stuck with him for the rest of the season and then release him. Where Elliot Richards stayed with Cheltenham and recovered with Cheltenham, and Roman Larios recovered through Argyle and played the next 3-4 seasons after. So I thought it was a disappointing act on Newcastle's behalf.
I mean, it's one of them, as I said, it's just embarrassing. It really is just embarrassing to the game of football. As a football supporter, I feel embarrassed that Newcastle have even done this, to be perfectly fair. I mean, Jamie Bailey, you wanted to jump in on this as well, didn't you?
Yeah, good evening to all. Just come back from a coaching development session. Funny enough, this is a situation that has come up again. in the world of football. If you remember, the Chelsea doctor is still going through with this high court battle with Jose Mourinho and Chelsea.
Yeah,
so,
we spent a couple of shows going through the situation with Mourinho and Dr. Eva Carniero. We're still waiting on a proper resolution on that, to be honest.
It's probably not going to change anyway. I still think she should win it. I don't know if she's been given the timing of everything. I think it's at the end of the season or something like that. This just seems, it just looks bad on Newcastle, especially with their season going in the direction that it has. If you look at it, all the off-field incidents with Steve McLaren taking over, losing McDermott and making McDermott having to call or text Guitierrez and Stephen Taylor, the two of them, and you're thinking you have to your board is telling you text them or you're fired. Oh wait, hold on, we'll fire you anyway, but text them just to let them know that they're not going to be here next season. That's a big take and a mick.
Yeah, we mentioned that at the back end of last season on PTLIVE as well. It's a case of, it's like, really, those two servants, great servants of your club, and you're basically firing them by text. That is, again, it's just embarrassing.
It's okay, but funny, I see that they've done that and he's won the case. The problem, the thing that I don't see is, since, and this is gonna seriously resonate with everybody. Since Bobby Robson died, Newcastle haven't been able to make a complete decision on their own, and they've all had the supporters up in arms. And Bobby Robson died, I think, 2009.
Think about that,
yeah. Rest in peace to him. But since then, that club hasn't been run properly. The only reason why they've stayed up is because Alan Pardew, I would say Alan Pardew pretty much got them in a good position. But past him, what has Newcastle really been run into? Chris Hughton lost his job, and they brought in Alan Pardew. Chris Hughton should never have lost his job. Then you bring in somebody to replace Alan Pardew after giving him a 6 to 8 year contract. What? So you're expecting him to stay? All right, fair enough. He should have stayed, but he didn't. But you gave him a 6 to 8 year contract. So that club has not really been run. And then you put this on top of it. This pretty much says exactly what you said. As much as who would really want to go and watch Newcastle United play when they know half of the players have probably got grievances? Remember the Cisse and the Wonga thing?
Oh God! Yeah, we had a pitch talk. I think there's a pitch talk push point, religion in football, discussing exactly that point on YouTube.com/pitch talk.
But it goes back to where heads. Again, I go back to the point. Bobby Robson was the last person to run the club in the right way. Maybe from where he was on the touchline, or wherever he was within the rest of the time that he was part of the club. But last time that club was run properly was when Bobby Robson was there. Mike Ashley could have made any decision that he wanted to. He would still have to run it by the top guy, which was Bobby Robson. Dennis Wise got involved, Kevin Keegan, Joe Kinnear, Chris Kinnear. All of them were brought in, and that club, even Alan Shearer. You go through the litany of people that were on the sidelines and the people that have come in as coaches and stuff like that, and people that they brought in as players. That club has not been run in the way that it should have been. They're still working on this whole French connection that Alan Pardew brought in. Again, the Dutch connection where Steve McLaren thought he was going to be in, and now he's on the board. Hold on, so who's really running that team? Rafa Benitez or Steve McLaren? Again, this is what I'm saying. It goes back to this idea of who is actually running the club sufficiently enough for the club to actually sustain what their image is, what their finances are, and who is actually going to be on the pitch on Saturdays.
Do you know who this reminds me of? It actually kind of reminds me of Pompey when they were changing ownership more than chlamydia changing hands at a teenage party. It was one of them ones when they were just going through owner after owner after. I think they had like 8-9 owners over the space of 2 years, where the revolving door was just absolutely silly. and it's like trying to get anything consistent, anything done. You could see it just wasn't happening, and it's gonna crumble.
Well, like as I said to somebody tonight, I absolutely hate the business of football, but I am so much in love with the game that nobody could ever take this away from me. So as much as what is ever happening at my club, at Arsenal, or wherever I go to another club and I see the problems there, you never know, I might even be in Newcastle tomorrow. I won't be, but it could happen. And all of a sudden, I look at every club that I've been to, and I think there's a backstory to every single situation, and the business plan of most football clubs means you can see the difference between a team like I'll say Ibis Eagles. They've got a plan from probably 10 years ago to now, and it's going to continue for the next 5 years.
Well, it's funny. It's funny you mention that, actually, because we're actually kind of laying down after the merger last season. There's more to come. I'll put it that way.
True. And I'm now working. I'm probably going to be working with a team that's doing the same thing with another team as well. And
in terms of, and funnily enough, in terms of you mentioning long-term plans and looking forward, stick around. International Continental Talking Points is up next. We've got a very interesting way of looking at it from a certain country.
Oh, from a certain country, that's pretty much puts it in Europe already.
Funnily enough, it actually doesn't, but we're not going to give anything more away because that's our next segment. But
that's it. Yeah, just finishing off the point. I just think, oh no way. Just finishing off the point. I think overall, the way that the club has been run this season pretty much shows what's happening in the High Court with Guitierrez. He won it, and they're probably going to get relegated. Overall, has the club been run properly in the last 5 to 6 years? No. So you pretty much deserve what you got out of the High Court as well. High Court battle, nothing.
It's one of them ones. It's just for me the fact is, as you said, it's very interesting that you mentioned about the business of football and disliking the business of football. Because I'm the same way, where it's like, as I've said on numerous occasions, I've said it on PT shows, I've said it outside of PT, I've said it to anyone who will listen. Football clubs are ran like businesses. Extremely badly run businesses, but businesses nonetheless. And at the end of the day, if you're running yourself like a business, like I said a few minutes ago, you need to be conducting yourself like a business, like a credible business, like a responsible business, like an ethically responsible business, and a morally upstanding business. That's how clubs need to be running themselves, not some amoral, greedy, power hungry, money hungry entities like, say, your FIFAs or your UEFAs, who are literally just mugging everyone off. Is one of them. The fact of the matter is, you can't run something like that and expect it to be taken seriously. Yeah, the money you make is all well and good, but you don't have to take the low road to make loads of money. You don't have to. That would be my thing, and especially with football, where there's a lot of youngsters involved. There's the next generations coming up wanting to get involved, trying to get involved. It's one of them ones. What kind of example does that set? To quote Bret Hart from the 10th anniversary of Wrestling with Shadows DVD, you don't have to be a dirty rat to make it. Business will be better, everything will be better, and he was talking about Vince McMahon. Business will be better, everything will be better if he was just a bit of a better guy. And the fact of the matter is, with football, business could be even better if it was just ran in a more fair and transparent way, and everybody could benefit, not just a chosen few. Because it's not as if there's not enough money to go around in football for everyone. If you can afford £5.136 billion, if you can afford to spread that between just 20 teams, then there's clearly no shortage of money in the game. That's all I'm saying. There ain't no, oh, we're struggling this, we're struggling. No, mate. You can afford to spread that money around. But it's one of them ones. I said greed rules the day at the moment. So leave that one aside. But you know what, yeah. It is one of them ones, man, where it's just frustrating. It is just really, really utterly frustrating. It's just one of them. It is just utterly frustrating that clubs actually think they can get away with this kind of crap. Discrimination and that, it's not acceptable, whether it be in school, whether it be at a football club, whether it be your local pub. It's not acceptable. It really isn't.